Shalom, Koholo, Yahweh, Bashim, Yahweh Shai, Bashim, Makar Kodash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of GMS, including the elders that came before them that taught us is true. And shalom and salutations to all the brothers out pushing the word in truth and in sincerity. The hopeful elect tabernacle with David. I'm the brother Yahshua. I'm back with the WW3 Daily update. Shalom and salutations to you as well. All right, so we're going to start here. We're going to start Monday slow and easy with the war and rumors of war segment of the week. Usually it's Tuesday, but here we are. Matthew 24:6, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Basically, we're just going to, get a quick little update of what's going on in Eastern Europe, all right? But what I do first is I want to show you these that complement wars and rumors. So here we have wars and rumors of war. Here we have wars and threats of wars. So we got rumors, threats, okay, and rumors. You are going to hear battles and reports of wars. Did we get, okay, so we got threats, rumors, threats, reports, right? And news of battles. Okay? Noise of battles would be the war itself. News of battles falls under rumors, or rumors, reports, threats. Threats again, right? So that's what we're doing. Here's some of these reports, or somebody's opinion for that matter. Propaganda, maybe. So this is Douglas McGregor, 19 hours ago. Shit, it's horrible. And this is Judge Napolitano. And we're going to let them give you the report. All right, or his take on it. Let's see.
I'd like to start with your general assessment of where the conflagration between Ukraine and Russia stands now in the middle of the first week in January 2023.
Well, I think it's important to note right off the bat that within the last 72 hours, the temperature in Ukraine, south and north, east and west, has now fallen permanently below freezing. That means that if we get 2 weeks of continuous freezing, there is no reason why, at least for meteorological reasons, the Russians should not launch their coming offensive.
Now, the fact that he said that first, he said, oh, ground is almost frozen. Now these tanks can do what they do. All right. That puts him, in a very credible position, this report. So I'm going to just let him talk and shut the hell up.
I think that's the first thing. Secondly, Bakhmut has figured prominently in everybody's calculus because it's drawn so much attention. Bakhmut has turned into something that is analogous in some ways to Hitler's obsession with Stalingrad for Zelensky. Zelensky and his friends seem to think that the loss of Bakhmut is unacceptable, would break the will of the Ukrainian people, demoralize Ukrainian forces. And so he's continued to sacrifice thousands of Ukrainian lives in that place. We now estimate 450,000 casualties thus far in the war, close to 150,000 dead.
Ooh.
And
this is both sides, 450 and 150?
No, this is the Ukrainian side.
Oh.
And if you listen to General Soluzhny, he came on earlier today, or could have been last night, talked about how supposedly the Russians are advancing over the bodies of their dead comrades because the Ukrainians have killed so many. The only thing I can think of is that he's channeling Baghdad Bob. If you remember when we intervened in Iraq in 2003, had this Baghdad Bob kept coming on telling everybody about the victorious forces
Right.
of Saddam Hussein throwing us back, inflicting casualties.
I remember
Going back to Tokyo Rose, if you will.
Dad Bob. I tried to interview him, but he turned it down. Turned down everybody from Fox, understandably. But I'm interested in your comparison of General Zaluzny to Baghdad Bob of all people. I thought General Zaluzny was the adult and was credible not only to the Ukrainians and the Ukrainian public, but to the Russian high command.
Well, I'm not sure about the last part of you're credible to the Russians. I just don't know what they think. I doubt seriously that they hold anybody in the current regime in high esteem. Having said that, remember that Zaluzhny was actually very honest to the extent that he could be in his Economist interview, and essentially pointed out, I need a new army. I need all of this equipment. If I don't get it, I'm probably not going to be able to withstand what's coming from the Russians. But now he's back in the saddle, and he's been told to get back online and back on board. And the mantra is, we're killing Russians, by the hundreds every day. We're winning. We're doing well. But you know, as well as I do, they're now pressing teenagers into service. We have photos of them and video coming out over various internet sites, which is tragic to say the least. 16-year-old boys.
It's not only tragic, and as you pointed out to me in some private emailing you and I did, where are the NGOs? Where are the non-government organizations that are humanitarian to prevent this? And it's probably, I don't know how old these kids were. The kids that I saw, their faces looked 14, 15, 16. It was hard to tell because they had military gear on, but they didn't shave yet. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Got to be a violation of international law and clearly European human rights, which is pretty sensitive on the use of children in the military. But beyond that, is it not telling of how desperate Zelensky is?
Well, of
If
course.
he's conscripting 15 and 16-year-olds?
Of course, but to this, you've also got to add the fact that they are desperately seeking foreign fighters now. The foreign fighters are becoming very, very important to them because they just don't have experienced NCOs and officers anymore. They're bringing in raw talent with very little training. And of course, you have this man, Milburn, the retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel, who came out and gave an interview and talked about how desperate the Ukrainians were. And he talked about the heavy losses and frankly, why he was pulling out his mercenary training group. So I think at this point in time, it's really up to the Russians. The initiative is passed to them. The weather is in their favor now, and there's nothing to stop them from attacking whenever they want to by the middle of January.
What is the status of the 300,000 or so, more or less, reservists called up to duty back in the fall, trained, armed, transported, ready to go? I'm assuming trained, armed, and transported and ready to go. I'll leave that to you to correct me.
No, I think so. Understand that I do disagree a little bit with some other analysts. Scott Ritter has argued it's going to take longer to get them ready. I think they're integrated now. As I said, they're getting the 2 weeks of freezing temperatures. Okay. There is no reason why they cannot attack. And everything that's been happening down in the Donbass, everything that happens with these missile strikes that go in day after day, is all about shaping the battle space, making it safe, if you will, for the maximum offensive power of the Russian army.
All right. In the interest of fairness, and because this is television, and because I like, or it's streaming, because I like to stir the pot, we from time to time have others on than you and Scott Ritter, even though you and Scott are
you have other people on? I'm shocked, Judge.
Are our favorites. This is a person, longtime friend of mine, longtime CIA guy that our audience loves to hate. And I asked him, Jack Devine, about the 300,000 Russians? It's a long answer, but he gets around to answering it at the end. Gary, doesn't he have about 300,000 called up, uniformed, now trained reservists about to enter the theater of war? And if he does, wouldn't that overwhelm the Ukrainian forces?
He had 180,000 in the last round. I mean, that's not chicken feed, right? And you looked at it, they weren't armed properly. Where did they get the new arms? Where did they get the training? How did they get so battle ready in 6 months? You're looking at Ukrainians who have been fighting for almost a year now. They're as tough as nails. Their strategy, their planning. You're going to send a lot of rookies in. They have gas, they have logistics, 300,000. They're going to just march in. They're going to use air power. I mean, do they want to fight? We know what wars are like when people, they went into Afghanistan. My goodness. I mean, full-blown Russian army went in and was driven off by sheep herders. And why? Because and I'll tell you firsthand, the Russian soldiers did not want to fight in Afghanistan. Are they really going to fight in Ukraine? I mean, it's like almost like a civil war, and it's unprovoked. We'll see how. Look at the Iraqi army. How many troops are in the Iraqi army, Judge? 300,000 armed by the United States. Where did they go? They went home. So size isn't the story.
All right, Colonel, I saw you chuckling on the monitor. What do you think?
Well,
Jack is always going to mouth the party line. I don't know. Maybe they this would be against the law. Maybe they clip the pensions of CIA officers who've retired and failed to mouth the company line. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I don't see this man as someone who knows much about Russians or Ukrainians. His comments about Afghanistan are really very misleading. The Russian, if we go back and look at the Soviet forces that went into Afghanistan at the beginning, they were overwhelmingly Russians. They went in there and they very rapidly established themselves. Then the subsequent follow-on forces were overwhelmingly reservists that came out of Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan. In other words, nearby places. And frankly, these people weren't terribly interested in fighting what was there. But having said all of that, our so-called Iraqi army vanished almost overnight, whereas the Soviet-trained forces held forth for a couple of years after they left, and so did its government.
Does he have a point when he says the 300,000 don't have the will to fight? Or
No.
are these 300,000? I mean, what are we talking about? Are we talking about like National Guard guys who have jobs during the week and they train 1 weekend a month and two weeks a summer like here? Or are we talking about hardened professionals?
Well, first of all, unlike most of your National Guardsmen in the United States, all of these 300,000 have served inside the Russian army.
They
That's
have
very
been
important.
on active duty.
Yeah. And anywhere from 3 to 8 years. And so what they've been going through is essentially updating their training, updating them on the various modernization programs, the equipment that's available. And they've been training for winter fighting. And they've been training very, very hard. The other thing is, I don't think this man really understands anything about Russians or Ukrainians. First of all, we all know Ukrainians are tough. I grew up with them, and I know their war record. They've always been very, very fine soldiers. That's not open to debate. But it doesn't matter how good you are when you're up against overwhelming firepower and you take enormous losses, which is what's happened. On the Russian side, anybody who thinks the Russians are weak is crazy. In fact, I would say these 300,000 are not only enthusiastic about going to Ukraine, I think they have enormous backing at home inside Russia. All the words on the atrocities committed by Ukrainian forces against Russian troops have filtered out to the population, despite the fact that the Putin government has tried to clamp down on it and suppress it, largely because they're afraid of what this anger could produce in Russia against Ukraine. So I totally disagree with his entire assessment.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to stop right there. As you can see, all right, everybody has their opinion. His opinion is different than Scott Ritter and blah, blah, blah. But they mentioned Baghdad Bob, and I bring in Tokyo Rose, okay? If you understand who Tokyo Rose was when World War II, when we were fighting against Japan. And she had a little radio show, and she would, like Adrian Cronauer, Good Morning Vietnam, right? These are radio DJs or whatever that would come on and spew basically propaganda, all right, going into wars and going into rumors of war. That's why I mentioned propaganda. So, uh, who knows, right? But it's good to have an update from anyone's perspective, but just remember that propaganda is part of fighting a war. All right, so with that, I'm just gonna close with the fact that no matter what anybody says, World War III is on the horizon. All right, Salakia. What the hell? So this is Revelation 11 and 14. I'll do it in the Berean. It's all the same. Second woe has passed. Second woe referring to World War II. Behold, the third woe is coming shortly. All right. So the war in Eastern Europe, so-called Ukraine against Russia, is going to escalate exponentially, especially in the coming month when the ground is completely frozen and they send those tanks in for their offensive, and you'll see it. All right. And from there, you know, once they start fighting for real, because Russia hasn't really started fighting, all right, but they will. So with that, we hope that the elect are edified. We'll see you tomorrow. You brothers and few sisters with that shalom.